Hello and welcome back to Core Finance. I'm Matt Brown. I am joined by Ricardo, who is the Senior Executive Officer at ActivTrades. How are you today, Ricardo?
Morning, Matt. Very good, thanks.
Good. Well, look, what's going on with the market? We saw risk off at the start of the week. It was North Korea again in making the headlines. I think there was a little bit of panic, and we saw this obviously a few weeks ago. But as that news flow has gone, we're back to normal, and the US markets keep getting stronger.
Yes.
But also there was a lot of move into safe haven currencies and now a switch out. And the dollar is key at the moment. And where is the dollar going, I think, is the big question that everyone's asking.
Well, there's different angles from which we can look into how the dollar is behaving and how it is likely to behave in the coming days, weeks, months, years. Some technical analysts think that there is still quite a long way for the dollar to make on its way down. However, that does not draw the complete picture. So we have to factor in then how the economy performs, the geopolitical environment, the way information is conveyed across, all of that. So what we've seen was early this week, as you mentioned, the new North Korea long-range missile test. This time they decided to send a missile flying over Hokkaido, the second largest Japanese island. And that obviously triggered all the alarms, and everybody was a bit worried about it. Safe haven instruments were on the rise. Even the Japanese yen benefited from it, gold obviously. However, that was very, very quickly diluted by some fundamentals that came out in the US. So we had the economy growth figures for the second quarter, which came up at 3%, if I'm not mistaken, which was above the widely expected 2.6%. So that gave a big boost to the dollar. So we saw a bit of a drop and the recovery. So in fact, that drop was not a bit, it was quite a lot. And we saw the euro dollar at 1.2 for the first time since very early 2015. But it's now back pretty much to where it was before that. So to answer your question objectively, we don't know. We don't know where the dollar is going.
It's a tricky market. And
yes.
I mean, focusing on the sterling, for example, and certainly cable has flirted above 130. It's lower, but I think now it's more important to look at sterling versus the euro.
Yes.
And certainly Brexit negotiations is the third round. Theresa May is back. She's saying she's going to stick around in headlines this morning.
Exactly.
So that's important, and Europe seems to be performing quite well. Economically, the fundamentals and the data are there. Where do you, I mean, in comparison, the UK seems to be lagging. Do you think this will be a continuing trend, and how will that affect the pound versus the euro?
I think the UK is very exposed to the sentiment of the investors. So the UK-related assets are very exposed to how investors feel the UK is looking after his interest, is interacting with the other major players, and that's where the Brexit negotiations gain crucial importance in the midst of it all. Yes, we're seeing that maybe in this thug of war between hardline Brexiters and advocates for a softer transition, maybe recent days, the last few days, have shown that the ones that are looking for a easier transition into a life after EU have gained some upper ground, the upper hand, sorry, in this, which is good. It is true what you said, that if we look at the currencies specifically, with the Eurozone doing so well in terms of fundamentals, also the dynamics are more positive. So we had at the end of last year following on President Trump's victory, and early this year, sorry, President Trump's victory. Last year we had Brexit, so there was a certain tendency to be gloomy about the future of the European Union itself and the currency, certainly. But then that sort of alleviated with the results in the elections in Austria, in Holland, then in France as well. So the more pessimistic forecasts for a big rise in far right and anti-European and a more secluded attitude towards politics have sort of evaporated. So that has been really good for the euro, and we've seen recently a dynamic between the two currencies where the euro is definitely gaining terrain. And as I may have mentioned before in the previous intervention, there's even some analysts now forecasting a parity between the pound and the euro by the end of this year, which may be a big surprise if it materializes. But the dynamic is definitely on that side, and the euro seems to have the upper hand at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you already mentioned, this parity, it's in the newspapers, a lot of analysts, and what we've seen before, certainly when euro dollar, there was a lot of talk about parity, and now look, we're near, just below 120.
Yes.
At the start of the year, it was 103, 104. Again, it seems to be when the papers, when the commentators, when the market, the analysts are saying parity, it never seems to happen.
No.
So maybe that's a call that, maybe positive for the pound at this stage.
Yes, I mean, many analysts, well, or pretty much all of them, tend to analyze facts retrospectively.
Yes.
So what they occasionally forget is that much of what they're analyzing and talking about and projecting as something that will happen as a consequence is in fact already factored in.
The markets are smart.
The markets are very smart, and sometimes when analysts talk about, oh, this is now likely to happen, they do not take into consideration that much of the likely consequence in terms of impact in financial instruments is already factored in. It's already materialized there, because many people buy on a special sentiment and sell on another special sentiment. So there's that old saying of buy on speculation, sell on news. Something
buy
like
the
that.
rumor, sell the facts.
Buy the rumor, sell the facts. Exactly. So much of this is already factored in, and I would be surprised to see a parity between the euro and the pound, especially as early as the end of this year.
Understood. Well, on that note, we'll look out for that. We'll have you back on the show, before then to discuss that further in detail. But Ricardo of ActivTrades, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure, Mark. Thank you very much for the invitation.